What's up? Welcome to the channel. I just want to say thanks for clicking on the video, whichever video you clicked on. I appreciate you. We got videos coming every day, so keep it locked. You'll find something you might want to watch. All right.
Conscious of that. Also, in regards to that wind, be sure to hang on to your hats and anything else that might try to blow over the side if you're going to the exterior decks of the boat. Another safety item we need to go over is the matter of life jackets, life preservers. This vessel carries more than enough life preservers for each and every one of you. On our cruise this afternoon, I am going to let you know where those life preservers are stored, just in case we should experience an emergency on our cruise. Now, right when you were boarding the boat, I'm sure you noticed the stairways that were right in front of you. The stairways going from the first deck to the second deck, and also from the second deck up to the third deck. There are life jackets, life preservers stored underneath both of those stairways. And those life preserver storage areas are accessed by doors on the back sides of both of those stairways. Also, on the second deck, there are 3 more places on the second deck where there are life preservers stored. There is a closet containing life preservers in a corner of the second deck cabin, inside the cabin area. That closet is located towards the front of the boat, the bow of the boat, on the starboard side, the right side of the boat while facing forward. Also on the second deck, there are 2 large gray deck boxes containing life preservers. One gray deck box is located on each side of the boat, again on the second deck. These deck boxes are on the outdoor areas of the second deck, towards the stern of the boat, towards the rear of the boat. Finally, on the open top deck, the open third deck, there is a large gray deck box containing life preservers immediately behind the pilot house. Now, these life preserver storage areas are marked with large red and white signs. As you wander about the boat, you might make note of those signs and those life preserver storage areas. Now, should we experience an actual emergency on our cruise, we ask that you please remain calm and that you please follow instructions from either myself or another member of the crew.
Take a picture of me. Oh, that is a really pretty view. We didn't buy our picture from yesterday. What did we do yesterday?
Last safety item on the list.
Oh,
the United States Coast Guard requires that I sound one blast on the horn when we are preparing to leave the dock. That is to serve as a warning to any other vessels in the area that we are preparing to leave our dock. We are preparing to get underway. Since we are scheduled to get underway in about a minute and a half or so, I'm going to go ahead and sound that warning blast on the horn. Now, this boat has one mean set of Kallenberg air horns. They are extremely loud. I would very strongly suggest those of you on the outside deck seriously consider covering your ears, especially those of you directly in front of the pilot house. Yeah, you guys. Because you are at ground zero for these horns. So if everybody's ready for the horns, here we go. Yeah, now don't you wish you had horns like that on your car? Now, we should be getting underway shortly.
I don't know. We're in front though.
Huh?
We're in the front.
We're in the very front of the boat.
Yeah.
I don't like these old line chairs, man. These cheap low line chairs.
I thought they was metal at first.
Huh?
I thought they was metal at first.
The one guy that was like the bigger guy down there, he was like, yeah, I've been talking to this girl, but she works up at the arch.
Yeah. He didn't tell us the name of the boat.
Oh, no, he said it, the Tom Sawyer.
Tom Sawyer.
Tom Sawyer. get all cool and calm and collected. like you just got your sea legs. Take your mask down for me. Let's see. Where was the chin? Say cheese. With your teeth. Look at this video. I took a video of him. Oh, this breeze gonna feel so good.
Yeah. You think it's as fast as the one that was in Georgia?
I don't know.
That one was like
This is
4 times bigger than this one.
Look.
Yeah.
That's where the other arch was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Every day at noon, it says it like it sprays like full capacity.
Yeah. What is
What
that?
about this? It's like a fountain. Watch out.
Oh, this the front of the boat.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the National Park Service and Gaby Arch Riverboats, I would like to welcome you aboard to Tom Sawyer. My name is Carl, and as our pilot had mentioned, I am a National Park Ranger over here at Gateway Arch National Park. Gateway Arch National Park is 93 acres in size. It also includes the old courthouse, which you can see coming into view on the left side of the boat there, the white building with the dome that is commonly mistaken for the state capital of Missouri. The state capital of Missouri is indeed Jefferson City, which is 100 miles west of St. Louis, and Jefferson City is located on the Missouri River. The old courthouse was originally the courthouse used by St. Louis County and later St. Louis City as a civil courts building. 1930 was the last year that the building was used for that purpose.
Dang.
And then
That was a long time
the
ago.
city of St. Louis gave the building to the National Park
Ooh, it
Service.
feels good right here.
Gateway Arch National Park. Of course, the centerpiece of Gateway Arch National Park is the Gateway Arch, our country's tallest national man-made monument at 630 feet in height, which equals a 63-story building. Now, coming into view on the left side there by the south.
You waving it.
Cathedral, built in 1835. That is an active Roman Catholic church. It is not part of Gaby Arch National Park. In fact, there has been a Catholic church on that piece of land ever since St. Louis was founded here 258 years ago. And I will talk more about St. Louis's history a little bit later on in the cruise. Now, Gaby Arch National Park, its history goes all the way back to 1935. Actually, before 1935, it goes back to before the 1930s. Before the Great Depression happened, the city of St. Louis, the mayor of our city, Bernard Dickman, and local civic leaders got together and they thought that, it would be nice to have a park here along the riverfront in St. Louis. And a local civic leader named Luther Eli Smith, who is an attorney here in the city, had made a trip over to Indianapolis by train. When he came back to St. Louis, he came over a railroad trestle which ran along parallels to the river right here. And as he was looking out the windows of that train into the area there where the park is today, he would have seen 40 city blocks of buildings. That was part of the downtown warehouse district of St. Louis. After the Great Depression, many of the businesses that were there did not survive. Some of the buildings and other structures that were there, some of them are not looking in very good shape. And so he thought, we need to create a park here. And because St. Louis was nationally significant as being the gateway to the West, they thought that it should be a national park site here. In 1935, Franklin Delano Roosevelt passed the National Historic Sites Act, and that created the
You think he got all this
St.
stuff
Louis.
memorized or he reading this?
Was Jefferson National Expansion Memorial. They explained that
They don't want to ride
a
their Tesla down off to the side.
United States.
Look, they're going to back all the way back. They don't run to ride their Tesla down on the side.
France, a double the size west for American settlement. It opened the west for American and westward expansion.
Nope, they're gonna bag all the way
So
back.
that was the explanation of why our park was called that. It wasn't until 2018 that the name was officially changed by Congress and signature of the President to Gaby Arch National Park. After the land was set aside in 1935, the next step would be to figure out what was going to be put on this 93-acre piece of land. So in 1947, the National Architectural Design Competition was held to get some idea of what those ideas could be. When the competition closed in 1948, they received 172 different design entries for the park. They chose the top 5 finalists, and from the top 5 finalists, they chose their winner. The winning design was submitted by a group called Eero Saarinen and Associates. Eero Saarinen was originally from Finland and
Like
later
that's
studied
burnt.
architecture at Yale University
Look burnt.
and joined his father's architectural firm. Later he went out on his own to start his own firm, and both he and his father had submitted separate design entries because his father was an architect too. But he's the one who won the $40,000 grand prize for his design of the park, and the centerpiece of the park, which gained most attention, was the Gateway Arch. The construction of the arch would not happen until the 1960s.
I don't know. You think St. Louis look better than Georgia?
But right now,
The riverboat seems. I like the riverboat better.
Bridge here in St. Louis. Actually, it was the first bridge here in St. Louis. This is known as the Eads Bridge, named after its designer, Captain James Buchanan Eads. James Eads and his younger brother came to St. Louis as teenagers and got involved in a river salvaging business. So when steamboats would sink here in the river, the insurance companies would pay them to salvage as much as they could off of those boats that had sunk in the river. Now the river is not very deep. It's not like the ocean. At least at this point, it's not a very deep spot. So getting to those boats was not a very difficult thing. But you know, the river is very muddy and very dark, hard to see things. But they got a very good knowledge of the river, the current, how things work with the river. So when it came time to build a bridge here in St. Louis, James Eads is the one that they went to. He had been building ironclads during the Civil War here in St. Louis for the Union forces, and so in the late 1860s, after the Civil War, they went to him to design a bridge, and this is what he came up with. It'd be the first cast steel bridge built in the world. It's over 1 mile in length from one side to the other, and it's a double-deck bridge. The lower deck today is used by Metrolink, our light rail commuter train, and upper decks for cars. You can actually walk across that bridge, get some good views of the arch and some good photographs. The bridge was finished on July 4th, 1874. Now off to the left of our boat, over here on the bank, you can see these brick buildings, many of them with cast iron facades. That is what the arch grounds would look like. We've been covered with buildings looking like that, narrow streets in that area. So that gives you a glimpse of what used to be on the arch grounds.
You got tents under there, baby.
The area on the
People
left
staying
there is
under
called
there.
Laclede's Landing. It's named after one of our city's founders, Pierre Laclede. And the area is kind of a mixed-use area of restaurants, night spots, clubs, as well as some residential areas and a few hotels over there as well. Unfortunately, it's kind of fallen on some hard times when the pandemic hit. People weren't coming downtown, traveling, and so hopefully we'll see a resurgence here sometime soon. Now up there on top of the hill, you can see a dome, and that is the former Edward Jones Dome. When it was first built, it was built as the Trans World Dome, and was the dome for the St. Louis Rams football team when the team moved from LA to St. Louis. In 1987, the St. Louis Cardinals professional football team left our city and went down to Arizona, became the Arizona Cardinals. So the Rams replaced the Cardinals as our team, and they played in that stadium, or in that dome, 70,000 seat dome, for all the years they were here. Unfortunately, the team left, went back to LA, and St. Louis is now without a football team once again. So the dome is just used by our convention center and America Center is what it's called, right there next to each other, used for special events and things like that. The tall building you see there is a casino, the Horseshoe Casino, and gambling is legal in Missouri. Riverboat gambling, I should say, is legal. So they have to compromise a little bit here. If you're going to have a casino, the casino has to be a certain distance away from the river. And so that's how they kind of got away from around the river gambling rule, if you will. That's kind of a loophole there. So we do have gambling here along the Mississippi River, here in St. Louis, and over to Illinois on our right side too. There's also some casinos over on the Missouri River in St. Charles too. The power plant you see here to our left is the William Ashley Power Plant. It was originally built around the time that the World's Fair was held here in St. Louis, which was 1904. Meet Me in St. Louis was the kind of the slogan of that fair. That fair was held in Forest Park. Forest Park is an urban park here in St. Louis, about 6 miles west of here. It's about 500 acres bigger than Central Park in New York City. And
You know how long the riverboat cruise was in Georgia?
Museum, St. Louis
I don't
Science
know.
Center,
It was an hour and
Missouri
30 minutes
History
long.
Museum,
Yeah.
and St. Louis Zoo. Well, the World's Fair lasted about 9 months. It was on the western side of Forest Park. There weren't many permanent structures built for that fair, but it was very extravagant though. In fact, the fair was supposed to happen in 1903, but because they weren't done building everything, it was held in 1904. And the thing that was at the fair that was a big draw was an observation wheel that was a huge Ferris wheel. Each of the cars was the size of a streetcar. There were about 60 of them on this Ferris wheel. I don't recall what the height of the Ferris wheel was. I believe it was over 200 feet in height. It actually had been used at the World's Fair over in Chicago and then transported here to St. Louis for this World's Fair. After this World's Fair happened, they decided to just essentially demolish the Ferris wheel and bury it in the ground right there where it stood in the area because it was just so massive. But the World's Fair was a pretty amazing experience and event here in St. Louis, bringing people from around the world to our city and putting us on the map, so to say, after our years of being the gateway to the West. This power plant did produce electricity for that World's Fair. It was one of the first electrified World's Fairs. And today there is steam heat being produced inside this building by a company called Trigen. I'm going to take a short break here for just a moment. I'll be back with you at the turnaround. So sit back and relax, enjoy your cruise aboard with us on the Tom Sawyer this afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Max. I'm the captain on the cruise this afternoon. You've heard a little bit about the history of St. Louis. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on the river today. If you look over along the right shore, the Illinois shore, you'll notice groups of barges tied to the shore. Those areas are basically parking lots for barges. They serve the same function for river barges that a railroad switchyard would serve for railroad cars. It's a place for barges to be temporarily stored while they're waiting to be loaded or unloaded or moved north and moved south on the river. These barge parking lot areas are called fleets or fleeting areas in river talk. Now all those barges you see over to our right are the most commonly seen size and type of barge on the river. They are 195 feet in length, 35 feet in width. They are dry cargo hopper barges. A barge of that size and type can carry between 1,500 tons and 2,000 tons of cargo, depending on just how deep in the water you care to load it. Now, there's a lot of cargo moves on the Mississippi River these days. It is primarily bulk cargo. There is almost nothing in the way of package goods moving on the river. And there are attempts every now and then to move containers, shipping containers on the river, but that really has not been successful to date. Now, cargo is moved on the river in barges, and barges are moved on the river in what are known as tows of barges, T-O-W-S. A tow of barges is a group of barges where the barges are all lashed together with 1-inch thick steel cables so that they form a single rigid monolithic unit. That tow of barges is then pushed upriver or downriver, pushed from behind by what is known as a towboat. Since the towboat pushes the tow of barges from behind, it might be more descriptive to call it a push boat. However, the term used on the river is towboat. You come out here and call them push boats, and you've just labeled yourself a greenhorn on the river. Now, there are basically two sizes of towboats operating on the Mississippi River. Generally speaking, there are very large towboats that push tows of barges long distances over the river. On those particular boats, the crew will live on the towboat. They'll usually live on the boat for 30 days at a time. Then they go home for 30 days at a time. And actually, there'll be 2 complete crews on the towboat at any one particular time, and they will be working alternating 6-hour watches or shifts. Now, there are also smaller towboats working on the river. These smaller towboats just work in a local area, such as the St. Louis area. They could be compared to the switcher locomotives that work in a railroad switchyard. These smaller local towboats, which are called harbor boats or fleet boats or switch boats, they just work in the local area. They move barges into and out of loading docks, and they are also the ones that assemble the barges into the tows of barges, which a larger towboat will then push upriver or downriver. Now, the smaller local harbor boats, since they never leave the immediate area, the crew will not live on none. They will work a 12-hour shift on the boat, then they will go home for 12 hours. A typical work schedule for somebody on a harbor boat would be something like 3 12-hour day shifts in a row, 3 12-hour night shifts in a row, and then 3 days off. And then the schedule will repeat itself. Now, the stretch of the Mississippi River in the vicinity of St. Louis is generally referred to as the St. Louis Harbor, and it can be a very busy place in regards to commercial towboat traffic, commercial barge traffic. And there's basically 2 reasons why it gets busy around here. First of all, there's a lot of barge loading and unloading going on in this area. For example, there are 16 loading docks in the St. Louis area that do nothing but load corn and soybeans into barges. Corn and soybeans are major cargoes on the Mississippi River today. And 99.99999% of the corn and soybeans moving on the Mississippi River is moving south, headed for the Gulf Coast and the Port of New Orleans, and for eventual shipment overseas. If you look over to our right, we have one of the 16 loading docks that loads corn and soybeans in the barges. They are in the process of loading a barge right now. They have 2 barges in at their dock. There is a barge on the outside of the dock. It is sitting at an angle. They have just started loading it. The reason it's sitting at an angle is because they start loading at one end and then work their way to the other end. They do not start loading in the middle. You dump a bunch of weight in the middle of a barge and you risk breaking it in half. There's a second barge floating high. It's empty between the dock and the shore. It takes the folks over there at that dock to our right about an hour or a little less to load a barge. Again, we're talking between 1,500 tons and 2,000 tons. If you want to talk bushels, we're talking somewhere around 55,000 bushels per barge. We just passed the dock on our left side. This dock we just passed on our left side unloads asphalt barges, barges of liquid asphalt, asphalt such as used for asphalt roads, asphalt roof shingles. And just ahead of us on the left, we have a second dock. They're in the process. I'll learn how to talk one of these days. They're unloading a cement barge, dry cement powder. The same kind of cement powder you get in a bag of cement you buy at the hardware store. Where they're in the process of offloading a barge containing at least 1,500 tons of that powder. The way they offload barges is that yellow crane will lift up and remove some of the rib gray covers from the top of the barge. You'll see some of the covers have been removed and they're sitting over there underneath the boom of the crane. And then you'll notice there's a large knuckle boom crane with a vacuum hose on it extending down into the barge, and they are basically vacuuming cement powder out of that barge. Just like you vacuum dirt out of a rug, on a much bigger scale, of course. Directly ahead of us is the newest bridge across the Mississippi River here at St. Louis. This bridge directly ahead of us was completed in 2014 at a cost of $695,000.38. This particular bridge carries Interstate 70 across the river here at St. Louis. So if you're crossing between Missouri and Illinois on I-70, you'll be on this bridge right here. Now, it kind of looks like a suspension bridge, but it's known as a cable stay bridge. A little bit different concept. Now, when this bridge was under construction, there was a little bit of a controversy. There were 2 groups of people vying for the rights to give this bridge an official name. One group of people wanted to name this bridge the Stan Musial Bridge, after some guy who apparently used to play baseball or something. I don't follow baseball much. Another group of people wanted to name the bridge the Veterans Memorial Bridge in honor of the veterans who have served our country, the United States of America. Eventually, the 2 groups reached a compromise, and the compromise was to name the bridge the Stan Musial Veterans Memorial Bridge. Kind of a mouthful, so a lot of local people just refer to it as the Stan Span. If you look upriver ahead of us at the 1 o'clock position, we have a southbound tow of barges headed towards us. Going to be passing us on our right side. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when he gets a little bit closer, but he is headed this way. Incidentally, on the Mississippi River, traffic moving southbound, heading downriver as he is, as the right-of-way over traffic moving upriver as we are. The federal agency with the job of maintaining a deep channel on the Mississippi River is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they try to maintain at least 9 feet of water in the channel, and they do a pretty good job of that. If the Corps of Engineers has a shallow spot they need to deal with, they have basically 2 ways of dealing with it. First of all, they can send out a dredge and dredge it out. Well, that certainly works. Only issue being, dredging can be kind of expensive. It can take a lot of taxpayer dollars to dredge the Mississippi River. You have to have a dredge, of course. You have to have people employed on the dredge. You need towboats and barges to support and supply the dredge, and there's people employed on those as well. So dredging is effective, but it can be expensive. So the Corps of Engineers makes heavy use of a second means of ensuring a deep channel on the river. They will build rock structures, piles of big rocks, long piles of big rocks that start at the edge of the water, extending out into the river, all the way out to the edge of the channel. Now these rock structures, these long piles of rocks, are called wing dams or dikes. Occasionally they are called weirs or jetties. Whatever you want to call them, the function is always the same. They are designed to try to redirect the flow of the water, the flow of the current, from along the edges of the river and out into the center of the river, out into the channel, in the hopes that by increasing the flow of water in the channel, that will help wash away sand and mud and help keep the channel deep. Now, if you look over to our right side, I have to stay kind of over here to the left side because this tow is going to be coming down past us. But some of these rock structures are visible over to our right. Now, these rock structures are pretty effective. They work pretty well, and they are pretty economical. Once you build them, they don't take too much in the way of maintenance, and they certainly have no employees. They do have a downside. The downside is that since the whole premise of the idea, the whole point is to increase the flow of water, to increase the speed of the current in the channel, boats navigating on the Mississippi River today have to be able to deal with a higher speed of current than boats did, say, 70 or 80 or 90 years ago before all the wing dams were built out here. And there are thousands of them lining the entire length of the Mississippi River. Now, although it is the Army Corps of Engineers that has a job of maintaining the channel, it is the U.S. Coast Guard has a job of marking the channel, and they mark it with floating buoys and shoreside signs known as day marks. If you look real quick over at the 2 o'clock position before that tow gets any further south, you'll see a red buoy over there floating close to the Illinois shore. That particular red buoy happens to mark the end of one of those rock wing dams. Take it from me, you do not want to go between the red buoy and the shoreline over there. Now, when you're moving upstream, as we are, if you want to stay in the channel, you will keep red cone-top buoys on the right and green flat-top buoys on the left. Now, this tow is rapidly approaching us. You'll note he has 15 barges, 3 wide, 5 long. There is a specific reason why he has a 15-barge tow. About 2 or 3 miles up ahead of us is the first of the 27 dams which cross the Mississippi River between the city of St. Louis and the twin cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis. Those dams were built during the 1940s and during the 1930s, early 1940s, and they were all built as aids to navigation. Their function is to hold back water to create a deep channel for navigation. Absolutely none of those 27 dams performs any sort of flood control function, and only 1 or maybe 2 are equipped to produce electricity. Now, of course, a dam across the river blocks your way if you're trying to move upriver or downriver in a boat. So each of those 27 dams is fitted with either 1 or 2 locks. A lock is a structure at a dam which allows your boat to pass through the dam. It is a lock which raises your boat to the higher water level when you're moving upstream through a dam, and which lowers your boat to the lower water level when you're moving downstream through a dam. Now, because of the physical size of those locks, the physical dimensions of those locks at those 27 dams, a 15-barge tow, just like we have over to our right of us, is about the biggest size of tow you're going to see moving on the Mississippi River north of St. Louis. Now, there are no dams crossing the Mississippi River south of St. Louis, so there's no locks, so you will see much larger tows of barges moving on the Mississippi south of St. Louis. 20 barges per tow, 25, 30 barges is nothing unusual. That particular towboat over there, by the way, is powered by 2 diesel engines. They are V16, 16 cylinders, 645 cubic inches per cylinder, 2,500 horsepower per engine, and they'll put out 2,500 horsepower per engine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, up until they get about 40,000 hours on them, at which point they'll need to be overhauled. We're going to go ahead and make our first turn of the cruise and head south. We're going to follow this tow down through the bridges. We're going to go south of our dock, see what we can see down there, and then we'll turn around and head back north to our dock. I'd just like to remind you, we do have our restroom facilities on the first deck towards the stern of the boat. Also, when we turn, the wind is going to change and change direction and change speeds. Please be aware of that. Hang on to your hats, anything that might blow over the side.
We're recycling stuff.
I think you'll be hearing from the Ranger in a few minutes. We got kind of a tag team narrator thing going on today. And I'll be back with you later on the cruise. Other than that, sit back, relax, enjoy the cruise. And again, I'll be back with you a little bit later on.
As we get turned around here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about St. Louis history. Many of you are probably visiting from other places around the country, visiting our city to check out the sites here. We welcome you to St. Louis, the gateway to the west. As I mentioned earlier, our city's history dates back 258 years, and the people credited with founding St. Louis were two Frenchmen that lived down in New Orleans. Their names were Pierre Laclede and Auguste Chouteau. Pierre Laclede had a dream of traveling up the Mississippi River to establish a business at the confluence of the Missouri-Mississippi rivers. That's about 13 miles north of the Gateway Arch. Now, at that time, in the 1700s, the boats you would have seen on this river would have included flatboats, keelboats, pirogues, and dugout canoes. All these boats have something in common. They're all made out of wood, and they are all moved through human power, either by paddling with oars, pushing with poles, pulling with ropes, or hoisting each sail and catching the wind.
I'm all right.
Pierre Laclede's group was traveling with a keelboat, and he had hired about 20 French boatmen. Now, a French boatman's job was to move a boat up or down the river, and they were hired for that purpose. And they were going to use those methods for moving the boats up and down the rivers. It took this group about 3 months to make the journey from New Orleans all the way up to that Missouri-Mississippi River confluence location.
Big waves.
They thought that was a perfect location for their business. And as you've heard, the slogan in business, location, location, location. Meaning that the location of your business is key to how successful it's going to be. And here on the river, at a place where two rivers come together, was in a perfect location for this business. And in those days, people were traveling by the rivers. There was some overland travel, but not much because there weren't any roads. And so people were traveling by the rivers. They were the watery highways of our country. Now, 13 miles north of the Gaby Arch is where the Missouri River joins the Mississippi. The Missouri River starts up in the state of Montana. On the western side, the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains, there are three rivers that flow together to form the Missouri River at that point. There's a town there called Three Forks, Montana.
Not that hot.
Later on, way after St. Louis was founded, in the early 1800s, the Lewis and Clark expedition went through that area and named these three rivers that flow together to form Missouri. And they named them the Jefferson River, after our president, Thomas Jefferson, the Madison River, after James Madison, Secretary of State, and the Gallatin River, after Albert Gallatin, Secretary of the Treasury. So the Missouri River begins up in Montana, flows across Montana, in North Dakota, South Dakota, down by Nebraska, Iowa, part of Kansas, and into Missouri and across Missouri. 25 miles to our north is the Illinois River coming into the Mississippi, and it starts around near Chicago. And 180 miles south of us is where the Ohio River begins. The Ohio River begins up in Pittsburgh, where the Monongahela and the Allegheny Rivers flow together to form the Ohio. So the founders of St. Louis wanted to establish St. Louis at that confluence, the Missouri-Mississippi River confluence. But as they got off that boat, walked around, they ran into some bad news. They noticed the area up there where the rivers come together is a floodplain. A floodplain is an area of low land.
I can go to sleep.
Covered with water when
I can go to sleep.
Not a very good location to build anything. Up there at the confluence today, there is Confluence Point State Park, where you can stand at the very point where these two rivers come together. The rest of it's pretty much farmers' fields up in that area. So wisely, the founders of St. Louis decided not to establish anything at that spot because it's a floodplain. So instead, they came downriver to the spot where Gaby Arch National Park is today. Now, at that location, back in the mid-1700s, right there at that spot, there was a 40-foot-tall limestone bluff that stretched along part of the river at that area. Well, when they saw that spot, they thought this was a perfect location to establish their business. They could be up on top of that bluff and safe from flood waters. So that's what they did. They cut down some trees, started building some log cabins, and the log cabins that the French built were different than the log cabins that we're used to seeing. The log cabins we're used to seeing are logs laid horizontally one on top of one another. But the French did it differently. They stuck the logs in the ground vertically in a type of construction called post and terre, terre meaning earth in French, or post and earth, where the logs were stuck directly to the ground, or post sur sill, which means post on sill. The sill would have been made out of a stone. They were using mostly eastern red cedar for their logs because they are naturally insect and rot resistant because they're going to be stuck in the ground. And they used hardwoods like white oak here in Missouri, which is very plentiful, for the rafters and for the other members or the other pieces of that log cabin. They would have had a different kind of Norman truss roof on top of that house or that building, with a lot of times they had a porch that stretched around the entire building or entire home called a gallery. And these types of buildings were constructed by the French down in the Caribbean, where they had territorial control down there. And so they were using that type of architectural style here in this area as well. So that's the kind of homes they would have built, the kind of buildings they would have built here in early St. Louis. They decided to name this little settlement Saint-Louis, or St. Louis. St. Louis, when it was founded on February 15, 1764, the reigning monarch over in France at that time was King Louis XIII. But we're not named after him. We're named after an ancestor of his. We're named after King Louis IX. King Louis IX was referred to as the Crusader King because he was King of France when the Crusades were happening. So that is the person that we are named for. And I mentioned Forest Park earlier. Well, over in Forest Park, in front of that St. Louis Art Museum, is a statue of King Louis IX, the namesake of our city. The first business in St. Louis was we were established as a fur trading post. So word got out to the Native Americans on the Missouri side of the river, a tribe called the Osage, were very powerful over here. And on the opposite side of the river, on the Illinois side, were a confederation of tribes called the Illini or the Illinois. There are about 7 or 8 tribes in that confederation. So the word got out to us Native Americans, by Laclede and by Chouteau, bring your animal furs to us. Muskrat, river otter, fox, deer, bison skins were brought to the fur trading post. And the pelt of the largest rodent in North America, the beaver. All of those animal pelts were valuable, but the most valuable pelt was the beaver pelt. The reason why this was because of a fashion. A fashion that started over in Europe and later came to this part of the world. That fashion was hats made out of matted beaver hair. So we're not talking about a Davy Crockett coonskin cap here. We're talking about a fashionable, expensive top hat for men that were made in hatting factories east and in Europe that wealthy people would be buying and wearing.
Look at that dimple.
A status symbol.
Yeah.
In exchange for those animal furs, these Native Americans get things in exchange like rifles, gunpowder, axes, knives, tobacco.
Hey, it's a green screen behind us. Oh, it's not a green screen. They just propped us in.
Oh, is it? It's cropped in?
Yeah.
Glass and precise shapes and color, made by the barrel sold over in Europe to be brought to this part of the world exclusively for trade with Native Americans. So Native Americans were not making those beads; they were trading for them. They would use porcupine quills to sew into their clothing for decoration as well.
I can fall
So this was
asleep.
a bartering system here at the fur trading post. There was no exchange of money. Pierre Laclede made his money when he sold those animal furs off to a buyer. Now this little village was starting to grow up. More French people began moving here. There were French settlements all up and down here on the Mississippi River, but most of them were not going to be the size and the prosperity of St. Louis, founded in 1764. The original village of St. Louis existed where the Arch grounds are at today. And as I mentioned earlier, where that old cathedral of Catholic Church is today, there has been a church there on that spot for 258 years, in one form or another. The first churches on that piece of land would have been log churches, and later the old cathedral was built in the 1830s, made of limestone. Off in the center of the boat, in the center of Gaby Arch National Park, we can see the Gateway Arch, our country's tallest national man-made monument, designed by renowned modern architect Eero Saarinen. Mid-century modern design was very popular around this time period when Eero Saarinen submitted his design proposal for this project. And he envisioned a great arch here for the riverfront to symbolically mark the place where our country's western expansion began. This would be the gateway to the west. Now, he said about the arch, the only thing simple about the arch was its shape. And in the days before computer-aided design, it was going to be very challenging to build the arch. Never been done before. And so they were doing a lot of calculations, longhand, old-fashioned style, with the things they would need to do to make sure that everything was placed properly, because the margin of error in building the arch was 1/64 of an inch. If the foundations were not aligned properly, and they were off by 1/64 of an inch, that would have been a bad situation by the time the legs would come together, or may not even come together because they wouldn't have been in alignment at that point. At the base of the arch, it's 54 feet wide on each side. The arch is made up of 142 equilateral triangle building blocks, 71 sections for each leg. 54 feet on each side of that triangle at the base where you can touch it, 17 feet on each side of that triangle at the top. This particular kind of arch does not have a keystone piece. A keystone is an exact center top piece of an arch. This arch does not have that. The exact center of this arch is simply where the north and south legs touch and come together. When the arch was being built, starting on February 12, 1963, and being completed on October 28, 1965, the last section put into place of this arch was the last piece of the north leg. The arch is clad in over 800 tons of quarter-inch thick, number 304 finished type stainless steel. Behind that stainless steel is carbon steel. The arch is a double-walled structure from bottom to top. Between those two walls, the base is 3.5 feet. That taper is only 8 inches at the top. To make the arch more rigid, they put concrete between those two walls up to the 300-foot level. There's also reinforcing stiffeners or rods that run through that concrete that are under stress that help to make the arch more rigid. The foundations are only 50 feet to the ground, but they're tied into limestone bedrock. So for those of you that are going to be taking a ride at the top of the arch today, some of you might be thinking in the back of your mind, does this thing sway? Does it move? And absolutely it does. Like any tall building is designed to flex and sway in the wind. But it doesn't move as much as you might think it does. In comparison to other tall buildings which might sway a matter of feet, the arch only sways a matter of inches. It's only going to move about 1/2 inch in a 30-mile-per-hour wind. It'll do 1.5 inches in a 50-mile-per-hour wind. And in a calculated 150-mile-per-hour wind, an F2 tornado force wind, the arch would be swaying about 18 inches, or 9 inches off center east to west. Another natural occurrence that can happen in this area are earthquakes. The New Madrid fault line runs through the southeastern part of the state of Missouri and has produced some powerful earthquakes in the early 1800s. So the arch was built to withstand earthquakes up to 8.5 on the Richter scale. At the top of the arch is an observation deck that is 65 feet long. There are 32 windows up there, 16 looking east, 16 looking west. And on a day like today, the view is about 30 miles to the horizon line. I'm going to take a short break here and be back with you in just a moment.
We are passing underneath first the Poplar Street Bridge, which carries Interstate 55 and 64 across the Mississippi River between Illinois and St. Louis. And then directly ahead of us, we have the Douglas MacArthur Bridge, named after the Army general of World War II and Korean War fame. The Douglas MacArthur Bridge is a railroad bridge. It was built by the city of St. Louis and completed in 1928 and later renamed after Douglas MacArthur. The Douglas MacArthur Bridge used to have an upper deck with a road surface on it for cars and trucks. However, that upper deck closed to traffic in 1981, and most of that upper deck has since been removed from most of the bridge. Now, if you look downriver ahead of us on either side of the river, what you see lining both riverbanks are these barge fleeting areas, these barge parking lots. Any area of the riverbank that is not occupied by a barge fleeting area will be occupied by a barge loading or unloading dock. And again, that's what the river looks like for as far as we can see, plus you can add another 7 or 8 miles onto that. This Mississippi River in the vicinity of St. Louis is a very heavily industrialized, very heavily commercialized river. I'm afraid when you come out here, you're not going to see a whole lot in the way of nature. You will see plenty in the way of commerce. There is a lot going on out here. There's a lot of cargo moving on this river. At any one time, there could easily be 500 or more of these river barges in the immediate St. Louis area, either waiting to move north or waiting to move south. The southbound tow just ahead of us at about the 11 o'clock position, he is slowed down. He is getting ready to land his tow into one of these fleeting areas. If you look directly ahead of us, one of these smaller harbor boats is heading out to assist him in landing his tow. Again, each of the 15 barges he has at least 1,500 tons of cargo in it. Somebody who's better at math than I can multiply 15 times 1,500 and figure out how many tons of cargo for the whole tow that is. And again, that boat has two, they're basically locomotive railroad diesels, so he's moving that load with the power of two railroad locomotives. We're going to be making our second turn of the cruise in just a minute, but I'd like to draw your attention over to the right side. Just ahead of us on the right side, we have this barge fleeting area, this group of barges. If you look just upstream of them, just to the right of them, you're going to see something poking up out of the water over there near the shore. You can see something just barely sticking out of the water just to the right of that group of barges. That is St. Louis's very own Shipwreck. We have our very own Shipwreck. Not quite as famous as the Titanic, but we got us a sunken ship. And it's right there, and that's the very tip top of it sticking out. What it is, or was a World War II U.S. Navy minesweeper named the Inaugural. The Inaugural, again, was a World War II U.S. Navy minesweeper. It saw service in the Pacific Ocean in World War II. After World War II, the Navy put it into the reserve fleet, what some people call the mothball fleet, where they put ships that are too good to get rid of but not quite good enough to keep in active service. We're pointed directly at it right now. By about the mid-1960s, the Navy decided they no longer had a need to keep a World War II era minesweeper around. So they put it up for sale as Navy surplus, and some people here in St. Louis bought it and brought the minesweeper all the way up the river to St. Louis and tied it up to the levee in front of the arch and opened it up as a tourist attraction. It was kind of a museum ship. It did not go out on cruises or anything like that. I remember being on it as a kid, more years ago than I care to think about. At that time, it still had the 40mm anti-aircraft cannons on it, and it was kind of neat. You could climb up on top of these cannons and sit in the firing seat, and they had hand cranks you would turn to aim these cannons. And you could aim these cannons at, say, people on the shore or cars on the bridges or boats in the river, but they refused to give you any ammunition, so you couldn't actually shoot anything. But it was kind of fun for kids, and I guess interesting for adults. Unfortunately, in the record flood of 1993, the all-time record high water here at St. Louis, which occurred in 1993, right at the peak of that flood, the minesweeper broke loose from its moorings in front of the arch. The current carried it swiftly downriver. It smashed into a couple of these bridge piers that are up ahead of us, which heavily damaged the minesweeper. Didn't hurt the bridges much, but it really tore up the minesweeper. And it went against the bank over there to our left, just behind us, and kind of rolled over and sank. And there it has sat ever since 1993. In the early days, there were a couple of half-hearted efforts to try to raise it, to try to refloat it, but nobody wanted to spend much money on trying to refloat a sunken World War II Navy surplus minesweeper, and the efforts to raise it were not successful. So it still lays there to this day. All that ever happens to it anymore is if the water is very low, so a lot of it is sticking out of the water, and if scrap steel prices are very high, some scrap metal people will climb out on it with torches and cut off pieces to sell for scrap.
Lord. Yeah.
Now, we had talked about the founding of St. Louis in 1764 as a French fur trading post. St. Louis would become a part of the United States of America in 1803 when our country would purchase the Louisiana Territory from France. So France controlled the Louisiana Territory of 829,000 square miles in size. This territory stretched from the Mississippi River bank, the western bank on our left, all the way to the Rocky Mountains and from the bottom of Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico. Our country was able to buy that land from France for the bargain basement price of just $15 million, less than 5 cents an acre. Some people like to say that's the reason why Thomas Jefferson's portrait is on the nickel. I can't confirm that information, but it sounds like a good story anyway. So when that land was purchased by the United States, it would double the size of our country and open the Western American settlement.
You take one more.
Now St. Louis is an American city. Gradually, those French citizens would be replaced by people from other countries. By far the biggest immigrant group moving to St. Louis were the Germans, followed by the Irish and the Italians. Missouri would become a state in 1821. It was the 24th state in the Union to be admitted, and it was admitted as a slave state. Across the river to our right, the state of Illinois was admitted in 1818 as a free state. So in Missouri, slavery was legal everywhere, in St. Louis and all across the state. But slavery here was a bit different than it was in the Deep South. We get the big plantations. There were none of those plantations here. So some slaves or enslaved people would have worked in people's homes. Sometimes slave owners would hire their slaves out to work for other people. And so that was a common sight in St. Louis to see people walking around, moving around the city. And some of those folks were former slaves who had purchased their freedom or were freed by their masters and might have become business owners or part of the black aristocracy of St. Louis. So that was kind of the demographic makeup of St. Louis at that time period. At its height of popularity with the steamboating era in St. Louis in the mid-1800s, prior to the Civil War, you might have seen steamboats lined up along our riverfront here from a mile to a mile and a half. Sometimes those boats were parked 1, 2, 3 deep out into the river. Now, we can't talk about St. Louis without talking about the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team, which has been playing here in St. Louis since the late 1800s. Originally, the team was called the St. Louis Perfectos. And
It's the late 1800s.
the story goes
Yeah,
that
when
one day,
baseball
the
started.
team was playing
When
the
it
game,
started.
There was a woman in the audience who was watching the game, enjoying it. She commented to another person that the color of the uniforms that these players were wearing were a lovely shade of cardinal. And later, the name of the team was changed to the Cardinals. The Cardinals played at Sportsman's Park originally, which
You want to
was
go to eat a sweetie pie? Or you just want to go next door?
They shared that ballpark
Don't
with
matter.
the St. Louis Browns American League baseball team.
Don't
We
matter.
can go eat
They
next
actually
door, and then
played
we
a
can go
World
to
Series
sweetie
against
pies
one another
later.
called the Streetcar Series.
Or
It was called that.
Don't
because
matter to
people
me.
in St. Louis could take a
I'm
streetcar
kind of hungry
to
now.
Sportsman's Park
Yeah.
to watch the baseball game.
I don't know if I want
Cardinals
to
were
tofu
victorious
right
in
now.
that World Series.
Well, it
In the
doesn't
early
matter. It's whatever you
1950s,
want.
the St. Louis Browns would pull up through
But I do
St.
want to try
Louis
some Amino's
and head
pizza.
east, eventually ended up in Baltimore and became
Yeah.
Sportsman's Park was torn down and the Cardinals moved from there downtown to the Civic Center Memorial Stadium.
So I want to go like kind of downtown and walk like some shops and stuff.
And home
I
plate
want
was
to go to like
actually
some
flown
candy stores
from
and bakeries
Sportsman's
and
Park
stuff.
over to the new stadium by helicopter.
We'll see.
The team played in the second Busch
What we doing
Stadium
today?
from
We're just
1966
relaxing
to
today.
2005 until the next Busch Stadium number 3 was built and opened in 2006. The team along the way was purchased by August A. Busch III, who was a
Did you go inside that
descendant
restaurant?
of
Where that bathroom was?
Adolphus Busch,
Inside
one of
that
the
restaurant?
founders
No, it was down at the
of
end.
dynasty.
It wasn't in the restaurant.
He was the one that changed the name.
It's almost an hour ride, 53
Yeah,
minutes.
it's a nice ride.
Busch Stadium.
If we
Originally,
were,
the
we were
idea
sitting in the shade, it would have been
Oh,
better. I like the
right.
setup of the boat we were in, the Georgia Queen. I like that setup better. Like, you know, it
Yeah.
had like,
The place after yourself.
the chairs were better, there's a lot more shaded areas. There was like, it was bigger, so it was like, what, like 3 or 4 decks or something like that?
Yeah. It was a huge one. Probably 3 times bigger than this one.
Yeah. It was
Or
real
more.
I'm going to hand the mic back over to our pilot and hope you enjoyed your cruise with us today here on this beautiful summer day.
If we go next door and like take our little thing, we might get a discount. They do that at a lot of places.
What?
Okay,
It's
as
tiny.
As the ranger already mentioned, in the mid-19th century, you would find this levee lined with steamboats loading and unloading passengers and freight. Steamboats were extremely important to the city of St. Louis in those days. Keep in mind that until the Eads Bridge, that bridge up ahead of us with the arches underneath it, until the Eads Bridge was completed in 1874,
she got a scooter.
the primary way of getting freight
She got-
passengers into
she got a
St. Louis
scooter.
was by steamboat on the river. There were a number of different
It done
steamboat
better
companies
than that.
in business at that time, and every steamboat company had their own distinctive landing whistle signal, a series of long and short blasts on the whistle that their boats would blow when their boats were coming into town. Now, the whole point of that was to notify people in the downtown area that one of that company's boats was arriving down the riverfront, and if you were expecting a package or a passenger or something on one of their boats, that was your notification that, well, whatever you were expecting was probably arriving. Just like now, if you got something coming UPS or FedEx, you get a text message or an email. Well, back in them days, what you got was a whistle signal. Now, the company that owns the Tom Sawyer dates back to about 1884, and we have our own landing whistle signal from that day and age. A series of
About to be time to get off. About to be time to get off.
I know, that's
And
what
to
I'm
honor
saying.
that tradition, and also to announce our arrival
Yeah.
back at the St. Louis riverfront, we're going to go ahead and blow that landing whistle signal in just a minute. All of you on the upper deck and the outside decks, you may wish to cover your ears and get ready for the loud whistle.
That would have been a cute picture. You should have took that picture.
Yeah.
Is everybody ready for the horn? Let me check.
Oh, shoot. Come on, let's take a picture. Standing up.
Okay.
You don't blow the thing.
We're gonna be like, or you can't see me. You need to be able to.
Well, somebody didn't like the horn. Hey, the crew and I want to thank y'all for cruising with us on the Tom Sawyer
Right at
this
an hour.
afternoon. If you're visiting
57
around town, we
minutes.
certainly
By the
hope
time
you're
we
enjoying your
get
visit to St.
dark
Louis.
and stuff, it'll be
If
an
you're
hour.
from the local St.
Yeah.
Louis area, we're especially glad you came down the riverfront to see us today. We're going to be docking in just a minute. Please watch your step on the stairways, and also at those places that are painted yellow, those yellow painted areas, please watch your step there. Also, don't forget all your stuff. If you had a hat or a water bottle or a package or perhaps a fur-lined parka or something that you left laying somewhere, be sure to grab that before you get off the boat. You don't want to run off the boat and leave it behind. And again, thank you very much for cruising with us on this really nice, I guess, second day of summer. And have a good rest of the afternoon.
I guess yesterday was the first day of summer, huh?
Yeah.
Today is also our 4-year anniversary.
Folks, just real quick, as the pilot lands the boat here, I want to mention to you that Gaby Arch National Park Visitor Center is open every day during the summer from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. The way you get into the visitor center is by the west entrance. Some of you might have been at the arch previously where you went in at the legs of the arch. Those are exits only now. So west entrance inside, we are under a mask mandate at this point inside the visitor center, so everyone, including employees, are required to wear masks inside the Gaby Arch Visitor Center. The ticket center is just inside that entrance where you can buy tickets to ride to the top of the arch.
Right at an hour. 59 minutes, 10 seconds.
Huh?
It's right at an hour.
Really?
Film Monument to the Dream. The museum is free. It covers over 200 years of history through 6 different galleries. It there's some more exhibits to see in the lobby as well. For those of you kids who are on a cruise with us this afternoon, you might want to stop in there and pick up a Junior Ranger booklet. Get to work on activities in that booklet in our museum, and they get to earn a Junior Ranger badge. An actual member will visit Gaby Arts National Park.
Throwing the rope down.
Once again, on behalf of the crew and myself, Ranger Carl, thanks for visiting, and we hope that you enjoy your visit to St. Louis, the Gateway to the West.
Bye, guys.
She copied my hairdo today.
Ah, zip it. Do you feel it like sink?
Do I feel like what?
Do you feel it sink a little bit?
Not really.
Go eat some yummy food.
Oh, Lord. All right, y'all. Catch y'all later.